everything networks, we're going to discuss a protocol that was discussed in the previous episode, but was outside of the scope of that episode. And that was dynamic host configuration protocol, in which this protocol automatically assigns IP addresses. The IP address also can be entered statically, which pretty much means manually, but the administrator must be precise on entering the IP address, subnet mask, and default gateway. If the information is entered statically and the information is incorrect, then the device will not be able to communicate on the network properly. It is easier and pretty much effortless to allow the dynamic host configuration protocol to automatically assign an IP address. But under certain circumstances, the IP address must be entered statically. Dynamic host configuration protocol isn't time consuming as entering them manually. And if you're wondering where the dynamic host configuration protocol server is located, it's in the router. The router receives the public IP address from the internet service provider and uses the dynamic host configuration protocol server to distribute private IP addresses to internal hosts. But remember, this is why the default gateway portion of the IP address dialog box must be entered correct if it's entered statically. It also must be the same for a dynamically assigned IP address, but the DHCP server takes care of that for you. And then the packet will be able to make it to the default gateway, and then we'll be able to leave the network and go to other networks and even to the internet. The router is the boundary of the network, which is why it is responsible for assigning IP addresses through dynamic host configuration protocol. And the router also possesses the gateway for the internal users to reach other networks. It's amazing to see how much of a role the router plays in the control and interconnectability of a network, and also holds an automatic key to getting the network up and running. And when a dynamically assigned IP address is no longer being used, it can be reused again by the dynamic host configuration protocol server, so that the dynamically assigned IP addresses will never be exhausted. This is great for scalability, which means network users' numbers can increase and decrease, and there would be no problem assigning IP addresses. But if it were to increase to too many users on one network and the network performance started to suffer, then another router could be added to segment the one network into two. And the same process would occur with a dynamic host configuration protocol server on the new router. This is how users gain their identity and also gain a passport to leave the containment zone and enter other networks upon leaving the boundaries through the default gateway. Network address translation, NAT, is used so that the public IP address will be used instead of the dynamically assigned private IP address used by the user. Not only the router acts as a boundary, but it also protects the internal users by using network address translation, which is why all network traffic must pass through the default gateway in order to reach other networks. I think this episode is one of the most important episodes because it explains the process of devices being assigned IP addresses and being able to communicate with devices in the network and also outside the network through the default gateway. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of All Things Network, and I hope that you will tune in to more episodes so that we can expound more on all things that are networking. This ends the episode. I'm signing off. Light speed, and bye-bye for now. Thank you.